Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room's post-election show. And I'm Robin Adair. We've been following this British Columbia election every week for about the last 2 months. It's been just a wild ride back and forth. So many surprises. It's almost exhausting right down to the wire. And John, after all this, after the election, the uncertainty of the election itself, a week later, we finally have a verdict.
Dun, da, 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 da! You bet we do. The mail-in ballots and absentee ballots have now been counted. And here's the final seat count. BC election result 2024. David Eby and the NDP forming government, majority government with 47 seats. John Rustad and the Conservatives are now the official opposition for the first time. BC Conservatives have 44 seats. And the BC Green Party have now got 2 seats.
And that's a story in itself, because you got to believe that Premier Eby's very relieved that he doesn't have to share power with the Green Party, the two Greens, which represents, about 10% of the voting public. And, Sonia First to Know, she works very hard, and I'm sure they had a lot of good ideas they wanted to put forward. But David Eby wants to be able to put his stamp on. He doesn't have a lot of room to work, but he now has a little bit of breathing space because they counted those votes out in Surrey Guildford. They actually flipped the vote. They flipped the vote, John, and it suddenly went from BC Conservative to NDP, and that made the difference. Although generally, the NDP did not do as well with the overall election as they had anticipated. They managed to pull it out thanks to the mail-in and all the other votes that came later. So here's what David Eby had to say.
They want their emergency rooms open and running. They want their family doctor, and anything less is unacceptable. That when it comes to their downtowns, they want to feel safe with their kids going downtown. When they run a business downtown, they don't want to be dealing with someone struggling with a brain injury, mental health issue, and addiction.
Big question. Has David Eby actually learned something from this experience? Is he prepared to listen to the public before pushing his agenda? Will he stop making big promises and instead deliver solutions, immediate positive change?
These are very good questions, John. And, I have to say, enough with the promises and platitudes. Let's get to some delivery. It's time for some real delivery. Like, how about more doctors now? Not promises. Oh, we're going to have medical schools and all this other stuff. How about more doctors now when there's so many people who don't have a family doctor? How about an end to the 10-hour waiting lists in our emergency rooms? Let's do that right now. And how about safer streets and take the drugs off the street and do something about all these people wandering around and going into schools with school children, addicts, this crazy stuff. Let's stop that now. And don't even get me going on affordable housing. So many promises made on that, and we're still waiting to see the results. It's time for action as opposed to words.
Although this is now a new small majority government.
If I were to take everything personally that's ever been said about me, I would be incapacitated. It's not personal. I'm honored to have been able to serve in the way that I've served for 7 years as an MLA. And my focus right now is on how do we have a government that really effectively serves people.
Meantime, John Rustad pulls off an amazing feat. He goes from 2 MLAs to 44, brings the Conservative Party all the way back 100 years since the Conservative Party were players in the province of British Columbia, but no more. They're back in a big way at the legislature. He's in official opposition, and that's going to be a lot of work ahead. So what does John Rustad think?
I think it shows a real appetite for change in BC, and that's, I think, what we've tapped into as part of the Conservative. All the polls were pointing to a very tight race. Our internal polls were showing it was going to be very, very tight as well. We are pretty optimistic, though, that we would be able to do better in a few areas in the province. However, we also did better than expected in other areas of the province, so it kind of balanced out in terms of the actual vote. But we knew it was going to be tight.
Where do we go from here? With such a razor-thin seat count, will Dave Eby be able to successfully deliver on his vision and actually provide some solutions? How much ruckus, I think there will be some, will there be coming from the conservative ranks with so many hardcore rookies flexing their political muscles?
You know, it's interesting, John. Where do we turn for some context on this? How about someone who has loads of experience? And that would be, in this case, Rich Coleman, the veteran politician. And what's his take on all of this and this narrow victory and how we go forward in all of this? Let's zoom him in. And now back with us again in the Victoria Rumble Room, a guest that we always enjoy hearing from. Exactly. Rich Coleman, the former Solicitor General, former Deputy Premier under the illustrious BC Liberals. Remember them? Yeah. Anyway, we're back to talk about this.
Fondly, actually remember them fondly.
I'm sure.
Yes,
I'm sure there's a lot of reminiscing going on right now, but the BC Conservatives came within a hair's breadth, but they have fallen short in the NDP on a razor's edge. They have now a majority government of one seat, a majority government to go forward. What's your reaction to all this, Rich?
Well, it's kind of like watching a former movie that I watched once before on the reverse side. But, it really is. I have a number of reactions. One is sort of like surprising because I really did think that if they made the right decisions and reached across the line when that whole thing came down with the BC United and the BC Conservatives, that they would have had a stronger coalition going into an election. I know there was limited time. There were some tough decisions or mistakes made with regards to where candidates were and where they landed. And if you look at how slim those decisions can be on the impact of the outcome of an election, it's pretty remarkable. The other thing is, by George, if anybody doesn't think their vote counts anymore, after seeing two minority governments in less than 10 years, and we had a confidence and supply agreement with the NDP and the Greens back in 2017, and now you have the Greens basically sitting in the catbird seat again. If somebody doesn't think their vote counts, they should give their head a shake and remember to vote the next time.
What do you make of all the grumbling about dirty tricks, or somehow this is an election stolen, or there's something wrong going on with the counting process? It sounds a little bit like Donald Trump, but you do see it on social media.
Yeah, and those guys should just go away. I mean, quite frankly, Elections BC, I've had experience with them both at a provincial and a municipal level. They run a very good shop. They're a statutory authority, which people don't understand. They actually think that in the U.S., that these people, like in the U.S., they get appointed by some party to be the person that's the electoral officer. Not the case. BC, the Elections BC is under a separate piece of legislation. The head of Elections BC is the statutory authority to make the decisions, not influenced by any politician or directed by any politician. And I've obviously been running in elections for a long, long time. And I just think when somebody tries to bring in the American experience into a BC electoral process, it's totally unacceptable because I don't believe a single word about what they're saying.
Right on. Okay. I agree with you. Thank you. Okay. Now that things are starting to settle a little bit, let's get into some mucky stuff. Something that particularly pisses me off. And that is around how the transition of people, votes, money happened from the old United to the Conservative Party. Obviously, a tremendous success, going from 2 to 44 seats. That's a big deal. However, I feel, and I want your opinion, that had that transition been handled better, we'd be looking at John Rustad as Premier right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, this was done in the evening of one night and everybody was out of work, so to speak, the next morning. I mean, it was distasteful. It was unfortunate that it had been done 3 weeks before a writ instead of having these parties worked it out a year ago. But that part is what it is. The unfortunate part of it is people were running for elected office without having any say, had the rug pulled out from underneath them and told, we're not running candidates. The downfall from that, in addition to that, was these candidates were out knocking on doors with volunteers that actually very much supported them. And I know one because some of the people I know that were knocking on doors with that particular candidate were hurt and didn't have anywhere to go, didn't have a home. So their bitterness probably kept them home in some cases, or had them vote for somebody else. But certainly the bitterness was because, hey, what did you just do to me? And people raise money, people are owed money. There's a substantial amount of money that's owed to people that would put up deposits for paper or for a lease on an office and what have you, expecting to be reimbursed by the riding association as part of the campaign because they had money. But on the day that that happened, the other thing people don't talk about, they also found out there was no money to pay any bills. And so you have a very sad situation take place. Then any of the advice that was given that's about reach out, talk to the other candidates, see if we can make a transition, where the two leaders stood in front of a microphone and said, we're going to pick the best of the best, and then or the best between the two parties and have them run. We'll work this out. That really didn't take place. And the classic example of that is Vernon. Vernon should not be an NDP riding today. But in Vernon, because rightly so, the Conservatives saw the talent of a very good man in Canvas named Peter Milbar. They asked him to run for him, and he said yes. But rather than sit down with a very good candidate down in Vernon, who was a BC United candidate, the mayor of Lumbee, the regional director, they decided that they would take the candidate from Kamloops and parachute him into Vernon. All the Conservatives, all the supporters locally were supportive of the independent, who really was prepared to run for the Conservatives. Now, what happens is he runs as an independent, and the Conservatives lost a riding they did not need to lose. And even though they were given the advice not to make the move they did. They still made the move. And as a result, that's seat number 45 today. That even though the Conservatives have won, the coalition isn't built yet. There's still a large amount of disaffected former BC Liberals, BC United people that went other ways during this campaign who could easily decide that they're going to go and not be quite so what their perception of the Conservatives are today. So there's some bridges to be built, and that's a lot of work, and they're going to need some very good people to do it. And their challenge is we have a lot of new people, and do they have the ability to do that, or how will it practice? So it's going to be a very interesting political science study in the next 12 months. Let's put it that way.
And while that's all being done and all the studying's going on the right, it actually gives David Eby a bit of time to get his act together. I mean, this has all come out of left field, so to speak, for the NDP. I mean, they thought they were going to coast to a win, and then Kevin Falkins decides to disband BC United, and everything changed, and now Eby's eking out a majority. How differently do you think he's going to govern? He seemed to have the world by the tail, and he could do whatever he wanted. It was a very, this is what I think, and this is what we're going to do. And, you know, he just marched around, and there was a lot of very strong language coming from the Premier's office. And is this going to be a more collaborative David Eby? Is this going to be a very different looking NDP? Because it has to be with such a slim majority.
Well, I mean, they went through a period of total arrogance. I mean, absolute total arrogance. I mean, they had a split on the right. As far as they were concerned, they were walking into a majority government, maybe with as many as 70, 80 seats because of the split. And that's what the polls said. And what happened, all of a sudden, one piece of the split, although however you liked or disliked what happened, disappeared. Now, all of a sudden, they had to decide to change and run a campaign differently, and weren't ready to do that either. I believe that I have not had the opinion that David is warm. I find that he's more arrogant. I think that he's more, his arrogance makes you feel like he's making all the decisions and doesn't have to listen to you. There's going to have to be a new attitude from him. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, if he tries to govern like he did, thinking he had to split and taking the attitude and some of the ways he approached media and what have you, it will not be a pretty sight for him either, because he'll start to see some grumblings in his own organization. So he's going to have to be more reaching out to people. He's going to have to be better with his MLAs, because, you know, the story on him is he's actually not that nice to his MLAs and that sort of thing. And you need those people. They're part of your team, and he has to actually rebuild his own team.
Okay, I'm going to have a little fun here. We're going to role play, you and I. I happen to now be John Rustad. Mm-hmm. And I'm picking up the phone and I'm calling an experienced ex-MLA has literally run. I'm calling you, and I'm going, man, I got all these rookie MLAs, and I don't entirely know how to make this an effective opposition. But guess what? I want to take down this government as soon as I can. What should I do? How is this going to work?
Well, the first step you should do is, I know he's already said they want to take the government down as soon as you can.
Right?
Maybe you should take a few months and have your guys learn the job.
Mm.
Actually build their own constituencies, because their constituencies are non-existent. So the reality is this was a by name recognition, probably a little bit of coattail to Pierre Poilievre and the Federal Party, and the evacuation of the area by the BC United. So it really wasn't a grassroots organization with a riding association, a campaign team, phone banks, all the organization that goes with running a successful campaign. That wasn't the case. This was just the case that there was no split vote. So you're going to end up in a fight and in a campaign in the not too distant future where the party you actually have really does need to maybe have a convention, build its riding associations, get a campaign structure, learn how to build and run campaigns, reach out to people and how to do them, and build a political organization as well as a political party.
You know, it's funny how these machinations switch back and forth, all defined by a handful of votes, as it turns out. Sonia Furstenau, she was going to stick around and she was going to be the brains behind the Green Party for a while as they just determined what they wanted on their wish list if they were going to be running the balance of power. And I think they were really anticipating that was going to happen. And then suddenly, pow, they're not. They're not going to have the balance of power. They're going to be two MLAs, two rookie MLAs. And this has to be a sad time for Sonia. She first loses in her bid for Victoria Beacon Hill, and now you wonder how long she'll stay as leader when her party is not going to be a player.
Yeah, and she's good people. Sonia's good people. And you know, she made a decision to go to Victoria Beacon Hill. When in politics, sometimes the bird in the hand is the better thing, to stay in the riding you know, and the riding where people know you. You're going in green into a riding that, particularly in this, but in Beacon Hill, particularly, very strong, historically strong NDP riding, right? Very, very historically strong. So you're asking to change two dials at the same time, and especially in the environment that happened with what happened with the collapse of the BC United. So,
but can the Greens be heard now, Rich? Is there a way they can still get some of their agenda across in this kind of a legislature, this kind of a breakdown?
Yeah, I think strategically they could if it's going to be a minority government. I mean, the only thing I would think, don't sell out like with the last time with your confidence in supply agreement. I remember saying to the former leader of the Green Party when he made the deal with the NDP, I said, you just gave up the best opportunity you had to build some foundation for your party because you are now have ceded the ground to the NDP. And although you think you're going to get cooperation, you're not going to get anything that you can point to that's going to help you electorally in the future or show you that the Green Party has some substance. The two, as I understand, the two people who won for the Green are talented people. And I think they're pretty qualified to learn. And they'll be on the same learning curve of like 70, 80% of the BC United. Sorry, there I guys slipping already. I was going to say BC Liberal because that's where I came from, but that of the BC Conservative Party. But remember, over on the other side, a whole bunch of people didn't run. A number of cabinet ministers lost. So they have a lot of learning curve too. So it's going to be, this is their opportunity if they take it to step up.
Is it going to be a long-time government? Is this going to go for 4 years? This tight a government, these traditionally last as long?
I would be very surprised if it lasted 4 years.
So fun to hear from Rich Coleman. Yeah. Whew. Always tells you what he really thinks. Always did. Interesting that we've heard people on the internet claim that this vote, this BC election vote, was rigged. And somehow this election was stolen from the Conservatives. It all sounds a bit Trumpish to me.
It can, and I do think let's face it, John, there can be some nefarious things where guys are double voting and trying to get that through. I mean, there definitely can be tricks and some nefarious actions along the way, but I don't think there's any big planned campaign. But we had a note from Dawn who sent us a headline that proclaimed the RCMP have confirmed voter fraud in British Columbia. Now, there aren't any further details behind that, and it's not appearing in other news outlets, major news outlets. There's no evidence of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all, but I just don't think it's a systemic problem in our electoral system. I think it's run fairly, and I think it is a fair outcome this time around. And John Rustad, for the record, doesn't think it was unfairly run either. He was asked about this. He says that he thinks Elections BC do a good job. And on that happy note, very happy note, John, I just want to say again, we really appreciate all the viewers out there who tune in regularly to the Rumble Room. We try to deliver, and we will continue to do just the same in the future on a variety of platforms, which I'd like you to maybe share with the folks out there who want to follow us on a regular basis.
Absolutely, Robin. Covering this election has been such great fun. I'm feeling rather melancholy and sad that this is now over. Why don't they just keep counting for another couple weeks just for us? Keep talking about it. However, it seems like there are going to be a few more elections coming up that we can rally around and get tons of viewers to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on a podcast audio. You can listen to us without viewing us. We're also on Instagram, and we pop up with some viral videos on TikTok. So, am I glad this election is over? Yeah, certainty is good. Am I hoping there'll be more elections in the very near future? Absolutely. I'm John Jurisic.
Well, the great news is we know for a fact there's a U.S. election right around the corner. We can have fun talking about that. And John, when you talk about the passing of time and the passing of these elections, it reminds me of my favorite Beatle, George Harrison, talking about all things must pass. And so as it passes, rumble on.